First of all, thanks for having us here and creating this wonderful opportunity to talk, and gathering such a great crowd of people sort of creates a positive energy that I guess we all need in these days, because all these serial crises that we're going through are not a lot of fun, but we do believe strongly at Sprint that the only way to solve them is through technology, because we need technology to fix a lot of the issues that technology creates, but that also society creates and situations like the Ukraine war create. Energy independence, for example, might be one of them, and that's the things that we deal about. I'm also very happy to have had Hendrik before us, because we've been working with him and his team for quite a long time, and you've seen his fascinating technology. So you might imagine what a great job Jano and I and the team of Sprint have, that we can talk to these fascinating people and provide them with funding and support and networking to create these sort of fascinating technologies that may change the world in a big way. Hendrik was also one of the winners of a previous challenge that we made called antiviral agents. So sort of the search for a broad spectrum agent against viruses in our bodies. And you've seen what Hendrik's technology does. So Sprint does not say use technology X to solve problem Y. We're saying here are the big challenges that we have in the world, the big questions that need resolving very quickly and that need to turn into products that we can all use to fix these issues. No matter how you do it, just go and do it. And then you get some interesting inputs like this one. None of us would have expected a technology like this to sort of deal as an antiviral agent. Very fascinating. Let me give you some background about Sprint. About 3 years ago, I'm a computer software person. I'm a founder and investor and all these kinds of things. I never was really working in some kind of public office or so, but I got approached to build something very new, a new kind of agency of the German government. And I found it so fascinating, and I had no clue what it meant to build sort of a public entity, a public Bundesagentur, but that got me very exciting. This is how entrepreneurs are. Many of you are. When it sounds really weird, we really get interested. And so this is what it was. Also, it's good to be naive when you start something new, right? We start our lives very naive. That's good, because otherwise we might want to creep back to the womb if we knew everything that was happening. We wouldn't have children. If we knew everything, we wouldn't start companies if we knew everything beforehand. So being somewhat naive helps, and it really helped building Sprint, because it's not easy to build, or it's actually not easy to spend public money, and it shouldn't be too easy because it's public money. But then we're making it so difficult that it cannot be used efficiently anymore. Now, science, this whole science system is funded with public money, and we're doing a pretty good job in doing real basic science, up to a technology readiness level of 2, maybe 3, but then something breaks. We're not doing a good job of getting this technology out in the world to turn into useful products. It's not easy to get your intellectual property out of the universities or the Fraunhofers or Max Plancks to begin with, but also there's no funding available, especially when it's deep tech, especially when it's really hard because it deals with hardware. I was lucky enough to be a software person. Software does not require a whole lot of capital. The research phase is very short. You're doing it all at the same time in a way. Your TRL is everything. When some cynics would say it's always TRL2 because it never works. Software just is crap all the time. It's not quite true. It turns into products that we're using. But when it comes to hardware, actually requiring a lot of machines, requiring a lot of capital to build those, it's very hard to get that money here. So as a result, if you look at a global level, or let's say at a German or European level, we don't translate science into products very well. And if it happens, the scientists leave for other countries that do it better, like China or the US, which then in turn is not good for our economy, because obviously these new companies need to become the heroes of tomorrow. Our heroes are actually the heroes of yesterday when you think about it. Most companies like Siemens, Bosch, Bayer, which still run the economy in Germany, were founded in the 1860s, 1860. That's a long time ago. It's even older than I am, which is a really long time ago. But still, they're providing, the wealth that we all enjoy in this country. Now, we need to make some new disruptive innovations, obviously, to create these new companies. And obviously, hopefully, amongst us here in this room and at this conference are some that will be those founders that repeat what we've done in the 1860s and beyond in creating companies that take us further. But for that, you need that funding to bridge this valley of death, as we call it, between TRL 2.3, public funding from science, or maybe your own public funding or mom's funding in your garages, whatever it is. But eventually you will run out of money. You need networking, you need access, to interesting people that help you put things together, because if you're running crazy projects, you obviously need a lot of crazy things to come together to turn into disruptive innovations, and this is where we come in and where we help. We help by providing you with some initial validation money, up to 200,000-ish euros. That goes very quickly. We've done 40 of those so far. We're operational for 2 years now. If we really like a project and the validation turns out well, so far 7 of them did. One of Hendrik's actually did. We provide many millions per year to bridge the big gaps and provide that funding until it's done, provide the networking, provide access to government that's sometimes needed, regulation, but also to other large companies here or other scientists that do things. And the third tool that we're having is what Jano will present to us now.
Yeah. So you already heard the term challenge a couple of times now in this talk and the talk before. But the question is, what is that actually? And challenges are our way of trying really an innovative way of supporting innovation, of supporting researchers, innovators, entrepreneurs, really to tackle the grand challenges of our time, the grand problems that we face with regard to societal issues, technological issues, and economic issues. And we really have seen the core of what that means in recent times, actually. Because when you go back to the beginning of January in 2020, that was a time when the first genome of SARS-CoV-2 was published. What happened afterwards is that really many researchers out there around the world started immediately and in parallel to develop vaccines against that virus to save us from that pandemic. And we really had like several hundred of these projects in parallel with different methods, with different approaches. And what we've seen is that a couple of them, a handful, really actually were successful and gave us the vaccines that prevented really like hundreds of thousands of deaths. But the thing is, at the very beginning in January 2020, we really had no clue which approach would work, would be the fastest, and be therefore the most effective. Now we know that it was mRNA vaccines. But back then, we had no clue. mRNA vaccines, like the other approaches, built on years of research. But so far, results had been so-so. I mean, they have been mostly developed for applications in oncology. And we're still waiting for the breakthrough in that dimension. So we really didn't know up until we actually did the development what would be the front runner and actually have that success. So it's only by the implementation of these research projects and when we go into the product development that we see what is capable of providing that breakthrough. And that's really at the core of SPRIND challenges, where we really identify and state the crucial issues of our time and then not only support 1 or 2 projects to solve these, but really a bunch of them in parallel with different approaches and really the most audacious ideas who can have a shot at really solving these issues. And I think that's really important because as we've seen, it's really the ideas that are new, that have not demonstrated their potential, that might sometime really provide us with a solution. And therefore, the openness really is key. But then, SPRIND challenges are not only about providing a new program for supporting innovation. I think it's really important, especially for a public institution, to provide a suitable support for the innovators and entrepreneurs out there. Because with these inherently risky innovations, there's probably most of the times no private funding available for these people to support their work. That leaves them with public institutions. We've just seen that with Hendrik Dietz. On that slide was DFG, ERC, European Union, SPRIND, all public institutions. But then the issue with public money, as some of you might know, is it's far too often overly bureaucratic, slow, restrictive. And that's really an issue when we face the big problems of our time. We have no time to wait for money. We don't have time for overly bureaucratic and restrictive conditions. We really need to provide the best support we can to exactly those people. And that's what we try with the challenges as well. We have short deadlines, quick decisions, and I would say money in the bank quite quickly. So in principle, at the speed at which the teams can send us their invoice. And I think that's really key to also be working with those teams on eye level and really show them that we are there to support them. You've seen the work of Henrik Dietz, and you've heard that that's part of one of our challenges that is currently running, which is on developing broad spectrum antiviral agents. And you have seen the motivation. When the next pandemic hits, or when we have to deal with all those viruses that are out there already now, we really do need better medication. But the problem is we don't know what the next threat might be. So we need something like a penicillin against viruses. And that's what that first challenge tackles. It has Henrik Dietz, you know that approach, but it has 8 other teams that in their own way, with their own breakthrough ideas, try to solve that issue. And that's exactly because we are really sure that there's a huge potential in these approaches, but the risk is just so high that it's just not a good idea to just put all your money on one team, but really hedge and have several in parallel. We have another challenge running which deals with decarbonizing our world, but not only with regard to emissions that we produce, but what we actually know is that that's not going to be enough. We're going to need to pull out CO2 from the atmosphere to actually meet our climate targets. The issue is we have no clue how to do that really economically and at scale. And that's why in the second challenge that we're running, we have teams that develop means of bringing CO2 out of the atmosphere and bind them in new products that are long-lasting and have a high value. One of these projects, for example, takes CO2 out of the atmosphere and stores it in concrete. And that's really a huge deal because concrete is responsible for about 8% of global emissions today. And if they succeed, they not only get rid of these, they can bind up to 300 kilos of CO2 per ton of concrete. So that would make one of the most dangerous products on Earth in terms of emissions to actually part of the solution. We have a couple of more of these approaches in that challenge, but what we still know is that carbon dioxide removal won't save us. At the same time, we need to decarbonize our industries, we need to get emissions down, and a huge part of that is actually the energy industry. We really need new renewable energies, but also ways to figure out how to store them. And that's going to be at the core of the next Sprint challenge that we want to announce today. And we have a little video for you that might give you an impression of what that might all be about.
We seek energy from renewable resources, but sometimes there is no sun or wind. In these dark periods, we can only generate a fraction of the green energy we normally rely on. As the share of renewable energy increases, so does the need for bridging these periods. This bridging can be achieved through facilities that store green energy in times of surplus and then make it available when needed. However, existing storage technologies are unable to provide energy at neither the scale needed nor at a competitive price. We need new storage technologies, which are fundamental for the transition to a green energy system. That's why we need you. Innovators, scientists, entrepreneurs. Your challenge? Develop new solutions for long-duration energy storage that will empower an energy system based on renewables.
So why are we calling for this challenge? Obviously, the biggest disruptive innovation that you can think of would be a renewable energy production that is so cheap that it's too cheap to meter and that it's available everywhere. Not only would we solve the energy needs of the world, but with that energy, of course, we could solve other issues that we have, like clean water availability in all places of the world. You can even produce food from pure energy. So energy, in my world, is probably the mother of all disruptive innovations that we can have. And again, like Jano said, for the antiviral agents or for getting the CO2 out of the air and creating it, turning it into valuable, long-lasting products, we thought that calling a challenge to fix the energy storage problem for renewable energies with any technology that you might think of is a good idea, apart or aside from also looking for, say, energy production that provides us with energy continuously. So far, there are not that many options on that side out there, and any one of these is super expensive, like laser-based fusion, for example, which we like a lot as a technology, and we would all wish to have it today. And there are companies here at the conference like Marvel Fusion that is trying to solve it. So doing one thing and the other thing at the same time is what we call betting the race and not a single horse. I think we should invest in all these technologies. Now, with this challenge, we're looking at how we can make renewable energies as we have them today provide continuous energy at any time we need it. You know that the dichotomy between renewable energy and the need of energy is pretty strong. Whenever there's lots of sun, we don't need that much energy. And at the same time, when there's little sun, we need a lot of it in winter, for example. Now, wind solves some of the issues because wind, especially when you use wind that's up very high, like we do in one project where we're trying to build a windmill that's more than 300 meters high, and go visit us at our booth here if you want to know more about these things. So we're also betting on that technology to create more continuous wind energy. But of course, there's not always wind, not even in 300 meters up. So to set the context for this challenge, we need to solve the long-term energy storage problem. Not just that we can store energy, but it needs to be very cheap. You know, you could say, okay, just take lithium batteries. I mean, we need a lot of them, we know that. They're very hard to produce, they're very expensive, but of course they do have a pretty good performance. Now, how can we go to good long-term performance, you know, from energy storage to store, you know, loads and loads of energy that we can use everywhere? I mean, some countries are lucky, they have mountains and they can pump water up. That's very efficient long-term energy storage, but most countries don't, so that's not a solution. But maybe, I don't know, we're building mountains or something, Jano?
Maybe you should, but that's really up to the innovators out there to come up with the best ideas, and it's about us setting the stage and providing the space for them to actually do that. And it's really like, when you think about it, we really come from a world of abundant energy. You know, when we need energy, we have it no matter where we are. It's there all the time in pretty much unlimited quantities. And then that's really the problem that we face. We leave that world of abundant energy. Because sometimes, as you mentioned, there is no sun or no wind. And I mean, you might know the feeling when your smartphone or your notebook run low on battery and you have no way of charging that. That might cause some distress for some of us. Or think about the people who are driving in their EVs and fear that they're gonna be stranded on some part of the road in the backcountry. I mean, we Germans invented a word for that fear, Reichweitenangst. I mean, that's a classic German move. But maybe it helps us really to think about that and encourage and motivate us to think about solutions. But when you think about the examples I just gave, I mean, we probably all can do with a little less screen time. That's maybe not a big issue. But if you think about a country as a whole, that's really a completely different thing. We cannot risk energy security. But then, at the same time, we have to solve that issue of bridging these gaps where we don't have wind or solar. Because otherwise, we cannot reach high degrees of renewable energy. We need to get up to 100 or almost 100% of renewable energy generation. And that's just not possible without bridging these gaps. And really, you mentioned that we have lithium-ion batteries. Why is that not the solution? It's not the solution because they're good for providing power for a couple of hours, for 4 hours, for 8 hours. But, I mean, on a really nice sunny summer day in Munich, I don't want to remind you of dark and dull German winters, but that's a reality for the other half of the year. I mean, there are really periods in time over the year where we have, for days or weeks, really low energy generation from solar and wind. And that's a problem we have to solve. And that's the case where lithium-ion batteries won't help us. You said we don't have the mountains in Germany to really have the degree of pumped hydro storage that we would need to solve that as well. So we need to figure out new ways, because if we don't, we're not going to be able to make that green energy revolution. So there are approaches that people tried to generate that long duration energy storage. You have electrochemical approaches, like batteries with different chemicals, with different systems. You have mechanical approaches, thermal approaches, chemical approaches, and as we said earlier, we need to find a way to develop all of these in parallel to really see what works and provide solutions for all the different use cases that we must solve. And that's really at the core of this challenge. What we also know and learned the hard way over the last month is that dependence on energy imports is really a bad thing and can put us in a really bad situation. Storage gives the additional advantage of really increasing the sovereignty in that regard, but only if we can manage to provide the resources for that storage ourselves. That's why I think in that sphere, getting rid of critical materials is also really key. And that's why the goal of this new SPRIND challenge is to provide long duration energy storage that can provide power for at least 10 hours in a efficient and cheap manner and not use critical raw materials. That's what's going to start in the next couple of weeks. We're going to publish the call for submissions within the next couple of weeks over summer, and then have that application period for about 6 to 8 weeks. So I talked about short deadlines. That's what you have to figure out a way to solve that. And then you, on the other hand, get quick feedback, get a first feedback after about 3 weeks. And then after 8 weeks, you have a final decision, the decision to go, the decision to grab your money and really get down to work. So you start this year with your work on long duration energy storage if your project has the potential for a breakthrough innovation. And I'm really excited to see that work happening and starting now.
And in the previous challenges, how much money was that per team, per time? How much money did they get?
So it's really important. Many people ask us, oh, that's a hackathon. And no, that's not a hackathon. It's nothing that you solve over a weekend. You've seen that with Henrik Dietz. He's been working on years for that. So our challenges are multi-year projects with multi-euro funding, multi-million euro funding for each team over the duration of that challenge. So we know, as you mentioned, that hardware work is really expensive. You need a lot of resources. That's what we know, and that's what we want to provide from SPRIND, but also with the partners that we have in our network, because we are not going to solve that issue alone. It's about building ecosystems. It's about reaching out to other industries and creating a whole new movement around that. So that's why it's reasonable funding in the multi-million euro range, plus a lot of external support that we try to provide to really push things forward with the teams.
Yes, and we don't want equity for it. We're before VCs, and we're the good guys, so to speak. We're not greedy. We want you to get your work done. It's like an order of an unfinished product. The construct that we're using is called pre-commercial procurement. If you're interested in that kind of stuff, you can look it up. It's basically you tell us what you want to do. We give you an order to do what you tell us you want to do. So it's also not a Projektantrag, Förderantrag, Mittelnachweis. Forget about all that stuff. It's not going to happen. We provide you with the money. We make sure that you spend the money on your product, on the development. We coach you through the phases. We make sure that you get, we even do challenge days. The first one in Leipzig not that long ago, where all the teams show up and mingle and exchange, how they're doing, which creates a lot of interesting thrust forward. And if you're doing well, we provide you money for another year and another year. And if in the meantime we think you're really, on the verge of a breakthrough, we can turn this into a altogether huge SPRIND project and provide you with tens of millions of euros to accelerate the process. So this is not a hackathon. This is really serious, and we're in to create a solution. At the end of this process, what we want is a product that fixes the issue that we're putting out here, which is quite a big issue. So we're in a rush. I think we have to make sure that this goes quickly. It's in August-ish, right? We're going to do the call, and then you have a couple of weeks to reply, and then we have a couple of weeks to screen, and then a jury will decide what teams get the money, and then we get going. From the jury decision to you being able to send us the invoices 2 days. So that's how quick we want to move. So
and that's where I have to disagree with Henrik Dietz. You talked about the patience that the funding organizations have. We don't have that patience.
Henrik knows that.
Yeah, you know that. And it's really because we don't have time to waste. It's
right.
as simple as that.
Right, okay, so that concludes this session. We're announcing another challenge today. Where and when?
It's at 2:30 next door in the theater stage, I think it's called.
Right, and it's going to be about what?
It's going to be about new computing concepts. So how can we solve the issues that we have with computation in a world where there's ever more data to be crunched, but that at the same time demands a lot more energy and more energy every day. We do need better solutions to actually solve these issues, to have more power and less space, fewer energy demands. And that's something where we really need to go way back.
Well, wait, Jano, they should show up over there. We don't do that pitch here. So be there at 1:30, you said?
2:30.
2:30, sorry, 2:30 at the theater stage. Now, this concludes the session about the energy storage challenge. If there are any questions, please raise your hands. If not, then I guess it's probably gives us some time back that we can use to grab a breath of fresh air. Thanks for attending. Thanks for listening. See you at 2:30 at the theater stage. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.